Hey everyone, Joshua Gibson here, and you're listening to episode 61 of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. Before we get started, I want to give a quick shout out to the show's sponsor, BarShield. BarShield created a maintenance kit designed to prevent rust and restore spin to a barbell's sleeves. My discount code, PWPodcast, will get you 10% off of your entire purchase. It will also help me to continue producing great podcasts with amazing guests. Head over to barshieldUSA.com, pick up a kit, and get your bars looking and spinning like new. That's it for the intro. Now let's get on to this week's podcast with Seb Ostrowicz. Welcome to another episode of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. I'm joined today by none other than, drumroll please, Seb Ostrowicz. Seb has easily made the most appearances on the podcast. This is the fifth episode. How does that make you feel, Seb?
Is it really number 5?
It is.
Well, we better put another O on that and just keep this going for the next 2 years. I love coming on. It's like... I think it's the same reason you enjoy coming on mine is because we're so rarely the guest. It's so often that we're just interviewing. We're trying to squeeze out information from someone else. So it's nice to actually be able to put forward a little bit more of your own opinions on the show. So I love coming on here, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And I agree completely. I enjoy controlling the conversation. So before we begin, I did want to kind of touch on how your training and coaching was going. Mm-hmm. So if people have listened to the last episode we did together, we kind of touched on it briefly. And I received really good feedback from that. So I'm assuming people enjoy having you on. If you think otherwise, please email me and let me know, and I'll be sure to remember that when he comes on next time. Yeah. So Seb, how's your training going?
It's going well. I can't quite remember exactly what it was or what it was that I said about my training last time, but I've been at a point where I developed a bit of knee tendonitis, which is, something that everyone has. It's not a big deal. It's not anything to cry about. It's just things that happen in weightlifting. And so I spoke to Glenn about it, and he'd mentioned to me that you just can't let up trying to progress at something and trying to get better at something. And I really took that to heart. So I've just been absolutely destroying powers and box squats and then upper body training, just pull-ups, strict press, that kind of thing. So, I basically set a goal, which was I'm going to PR my back squat on a box squat because I'm notoriously not good going off a box because I like to use a lot of bounce out of the squat. So it's quite hard for me to get up to heavy weights on a box squat. So I've just been dialing that in and getting as much volume in as possible. I went to the gym earlier today, just did 4 sets of 4 heavy, well, at least heavy for me. I was up at 160. I'm not, like I said, I'm not great off a box. And it's transitioning well to everything. I've PR'd my power snatch, I've PR'd my power clean, PR'd my push jerks. So, things are going up. And I just know that when it gets to a point where my knee feels fresh enough, then I can start adding in full snatches, full cleans, full squats, and PRing that. But I think the real point there is whatever your injury is, use that as, find the silver lining. Use that as a way to get unbelievably dominant at something that you've never been dominant at. When people hurt their shoulders, it's like, well, you've got great opportunity to become an amazing squatter. Or if someone hurts their knee, it's like you can get the biggest pull of all time. Like try and get a huge RDL, try and get a huge strict press, just something, just always never let up that adaptation, always improve at something. And so that's what I've been trying to do this last month or two. Yeah,
no, I know we've talked about this before, but I just want to reiterate that it's always easier said than done, right? At least for myself, because I find myself going into the gym and the bench press goes really well, just smoking weights. I did 105 for 3 sets of 5 yesterday, and it was the easiest 105s ever felt. But it's so, like, mentally, it's the easiest thing I can do in the gym. There's no struggle of, will I take this weight? Will I get under the bar? Will I pull on it? Will I actually commit to the lift? And even when you're not training the snatch and clean and jerk heavy, because it is such a technical movement, you're always kind of dialed in. And you're trying to be as focused as possible. So I find myself kind of just breezing through workouts. I will say it it is great for the coaching aspect because then you can give more time to people that you're working with.
Yeah, that's very true.
I noticed, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but when you're actually in the middle of a training cycle for the snatch and clean and jerk, it's tough to pull yourself out of that as an athlete. And it's tough to really take time out of your session. I don't know if you do this, but to watch other lifters and kind of get out of that zone. Would you say... Oh, go ahead.
Go on. Okay, well, what I do with that is I just don't train when my athletes are training. I just make sure that all my training is done before my guys come in. And then I just try and make a point of not thinking about the podcast, don't think about sales, don't think about anything other than these guys training right now and helping them lift. And that doesn't always come out as me saying a lot to them. I think I'm quite quiet as a coach, especially once someone has reached a certain level. I mean, when they're a beginner, I talk to them a little bit more, but I like to be present in every single training session that I'm there with them for, and not try and... I don't like to mix my own training with their training, as much as possible, at least.
Yeah, I think it is pretty cool, though, when you get everyone that you work with to kind of hype you up and create a really good environment. So I think that's... Sometimes I get kind of jealous of the environment that they have because we're all putting so much energy into it, and I'm like, I really need to be snatching heavy right now. Like, that would be so awesome.
Yeah.
Now, we talked briefly about your training, but how's your coaching going?
Coaching's going well. I mean, right off the back of us doing that podcast for Weightlifting House the other day, I actually had a few people messaging me asking for a bit of personal training or online training because they liked the methodology, the approach that I have, which essentially is to look at someone's lifting, look at their technical errors, work out what muscle group is weak that's causing that technical error, and increase that or accelerate the progress of that muscle group through accessory training whilst globally getting stronger, with squats and that kind of thing. So that's fun. So, I mean, I've got a nice mixture now of people that I see in person every day and people that I talk to every day online. And I mean, some of them are quite good. Like I've got a guy who snatches 140. I got this new guy. It's called Isaac, who he weighs 85 kilos. He's just come over from powerlifting and he back squats 240. So I was like, all right, well, we're going to have some fun. He's 6 weeks into training. He's already snatched over 100. So that's a lot of fun. But it's interesting because they're all so different. I've got guys who are very strong and I've got guys who are very weak. And so manipulating the volume of what we put and what we stress on each area of their training is very different. There is no way that I could put out a generic program at this point for these guys because it would do such a disservice to each of them. So training or the program that I give these guys at the moment is very, very different. But I'm loving it. I have a great time coaching my guys and seeing how they do. I've got masters athletes, I've got young athletes, I've got strong athletes, weak athletes, guys, girls. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and when we did talk about your method of programming, I think what that's done since then for me is reminded me that I need to be more methodical about it. And it's not that I wasn't before, but it's being even more attentive to the detail. It's thinking about why I struggled for a few days to figure out a Friday workout for one of my athletes. And it's not that it's not that I couldn't just plug and play, but it's that I wanted it to be so perfect. And you get to a point where maybe it's wasted effort, but I felt like this is going to dictate the next 4 weeks. It's of the utmost importance.
Man. Yeah.
And so for me, I put a lot into that, and it takes a lot of time. And I think that is a direct result from you talking about how you went about programming. So I would like to kind of transition to talking about how to maximize someone's ability in the snatch and clean and jerk before a competition. So we talked about tapering in the last podcast that we recorded, and we're referencing it a lot. So if you haven't listened to it, go back, give it a listen, come back to this one, or listen to this one and then go back to that one. That'd be cool. But as far as peaking those lifts, we're starting 4 to 6 weeks out. We want to be the best in the snatch, clean and jerk from the floor. Let's talk about when it is important to peak in the sense that I know we talked about it before for major competitions, but I don't think I never really got my answer fleshed out. So as far as like increasing the frequency, increasing the intensity, going really hard in the snatch, clean, and jerk, what does that look like from your point of view? How you would program it for someone getting ready for a major competition? If you could kind of break that down for us.
How far back are we starting?
Well, I'm assuming you have like a cycle dedicated just to the snatch, clean, and jerk. And obviously, as you go through a training program, say a 12-week program, you're going to start less frequently and then kind of develop from there. But as far as the maximum number of snatch and clean and jerk training sessions within a week, let's kind of start there. Right. So if you start with 5 and end with 5, let's cover that time period.
I mean, I like
do you add them in, or how does that work?
Do I add in training sessions?
Yeah. So like if you were to start the peak, say 4 weeks out, the fourth week out, you have 3 snatch and clean and jerk sessions, and then you go 4 the next week, 5th the last week, and then you taper the week after that.
I don't add too many sessions in. I kind of just like to keep it how it is. I mean, most of my guys run 5 days a week of training, and I'll keep them on 5 days a week of training. I mean, it might be that in the final week I'm dropping a session or even dropping 2 sessions, but I don't change the frequency with which they train. If they're able to come in and split the workout into morning and evening, we'll do that because, that is a more beneficial way to train in many ways. But the actual volume of snatches and clean and jerks probably goes down. In terms of, I have a girl who I think is a really great athlete. She has amazing feel for the bar. And I actually had her doing sets of 4 at one point. Recently, within the last couple of weeks, she was doing sets of 4 on the snatch. And she might do 4 sets of 4. So that's 16 reps. And we're looking at, 80% probably at that point. And that's a pretty tough workout. But if you look at Prilipin's chart, that fits about right for the amount of volume that you want to do in an ideal range for that percentage or that intensity. And then as we approach a competition, that might come down and she might be doing, 3 doubles at 90% or maybe 3 singles at 95% or 5 doubles at 85%. And so the actual volume of work is going to come down. But the necessity to be more technically perfect will go up. So the sessions become more demanding another one, but there is far less margin for error in these things. And it's the same. I mean, I'll probably drop. I mean, we never do powers. I basically don't give any of my guys powers. But if we were doing powers, we'd drop that. If we were doing hangs, we'd start dropping that. And we would, if you look at training as this pyramid, and at the top of it, you have a competition. And all of that is max snatch, max clean and jerk. And below that pyramid, things spread out, and you have sets of 3 and sets of 2 and 4s and hangs and deficits. Everything, wherever you are in that period, sets of 3, they're going to start to singles, and things are going to peak more and more towards that. Intensity goes up, and volume does come down. But, the main thing is just not stressing the body from crazy amounts of volume on the snatch and clean and jerk. Because when you do sets of 4, you're doing it for a purpose. You're doing it to get more repetition in and get more practice in, and also to condition your body to be able to do more attempts at heavier weights. So we've done that. We don't need to do that. That's not the thing that directly causes you to have a heavy single. So we're not going to keep doing these sets of 4 all the time. We're going to slowly get towards 1s, heavy singles, but rarely am I pushing these guys to absolute max on the snatch and clean and jerk.
Okay. So if we're looking at, and this is kind of how I went about it, the last 12-week training program I developed for someone. The first 4 weeks, they did the snatch, clean, and jerk, variations 3 times a week. The next 4 weeks, they did it 4 times a week, and then the last 4 weeks, they did it 5 times a week. And 2 of those sessions, the added sessions were powers initially, and then can transition to a lighter variation. So we used no hook movement to work on some technical issues. But she had 3 heavy sessions, doubles, like a complex. It's just like a pull and a snatch or a clean front squat jerk. And then the actual competition lifts, heavy singles. So when you're writing that last section of the program, kind of more concerned with how many days they're snatching and clean and jerking. If it was a 5-day program initially, does it transition to 5 days a week? Does it stay at 3?
So it in the final 4 weeks of training, I have my guys snatch 4 times a week, and clean and jerk 3, maybe 4 if they're doing some kind of lighter variation. I mean, ideally, if these guys were full-time athletes, I would have them do it more often. But the issue I have with making my guys snatch and clean and jerk both every single session is that, to me, it's kind of not looking at the bigger picture, which is 4 years down the road and 8 years down the road. In that, if you are just pushing the snatch and the clean and jerk all the time, that's taking away from something else. And if your end goal with your entire career is 4 weeks from this moment, then we're going to snatch and clean and jerk every single day, because that's the best way to be the best in 4 weeks from this moment right now. But I want them to be the best they can be. So I'm on strength movements. So I like to dedicate 1 or 2 days a week to predominantly strength and accessory lifts. And I might check in, on a Tuesday, I like to give everyone squats and some kind of upper body movement. It might be a push press, heavy pulls, that kind of thing. And we might do some hang snatching beforehand, but predominantly that training session is to get strong. And if you keep that session in there all the time for years and years and years, it's going to gradually, one step at a time, get them better and better and better. And as soon as you start letting up on those things, sure, it might make you better in 4 weeks from this moment, but it won't make you better in 4 years from this moment. At least that's how I see it. So I don't go crazy with the volume in the snatch and clean and jerk. I don't like to change things too much. I just slowly increase the amount of weight that they're lifting, and I slowly decrease the amount of reps that they're taking.
That's really interesting. And I know it may seem, maybe to listeners, maybe to yourself, Seb, that I'm being very very picky in the way you answer this question, because I'm trying to get at a really particular aspect of training and programming, which is maximizing someone's ability in the snatch, clean, and jerk. Now, if they were preparing for a national competition, would that again change, right? Because that leads into the possibility of for Americans, a Pan American spot, or international meets. So the importance is essentially squared, right? So in that case, would you then transition to a more kind of daily snatching and clean and jerking model? And
yes.
Okay. That's kind of what I
probably would. I mean, I probably would. I think, my example of I want you to be the best you can be in 8 years is, to some extent, you have to take that with a pinch of salt, because I'm just being a bit of a dick when I say that. But you know what I mean, which is like that most people aren't competing to be able to go to Pan Ams. And if you're at that point, and going to Pan Ams or going to Europeans or Commonwealth is the biggest thing in your career, and it's the thing that can push you to be able to do more and more and more down the line. It's going to be the thing that actually excels you in your career. So at that point, we do have to stress that as some kind of finite end point, that we're going to do everything we can to be perfect for that one moment. So in that sense, I probably would have the frequency of the lifts go up. I wouldn't have them going to 90% every single day, 5 days a week. I mean, I don't know if you ever looked at some of the training that Ilya does when he talks about what he does, but he basically does on a Monday 90%, Tuesday 85%, Wednesday 95%, Thursday 85%, and then Friday max, and then some kind of lifting. So there's this kind of undulation of 90, 85, 95, 80, and then max. So I'd probably do something closer to that, where I want there to be specific testing moments during that week where people have to achieve a certain standard in what we're trying to get them to compete at. And there might even be something as interesting as, 4 weeks out, I want them to hit their opener 8 times. Or 3 weeks out, I want them to be able to hit their second attempt on 3 days of that week. And then, that kind of thing, something like that.
How important? Okay, two questions. Sorry to interrupt, but
yeah,
my desire to understand how that's progressed is So I'm really curious to hear how that would progress from week to week. So if we have a 90-85, 90-80 max, or whatever it was, does that go up a certain percentage each week? Does it kind of maintain the same so that on Friday you just continually increase the intensity while the rest of the week maintains whatever it's at?
Yeah, I mean, I've never actually written that as a progression. That's just something that I know that Ilya did for a long period of time before 2014. But I would probably look at, I mean, one of the things which I've really enjoyed doing is doing some kind of, what's it called? Like you'll do 80% for a double, 85% for a single, 90% for a single. And you do that 3 times through.
Oh, waves.
Waves. I completely missed the word. Then the next week you'll bump that up, 3%. And then the week after you'll bump it up 3%. To the point where, maybe week 1, it was a double, a single, 3 times through, or even a triple, a double, a single. And by the end, it's just 1, 1, 1. And it's, final warm-up attempt, opener, second attempt, 3 times through. And that way, there's this progression where people know, okay, I managed it last week. This week I've got 1 less rep per wave, but I've got to go 3% heavier. And so people gain this kind of confidence from that. But I do like the idea of what you're saying, that things stay relatively similar during the week. And then on that Friday, you'll set a target goal of you're going to snatch 100 today. You're going to snatch 103 on week 2. You're going to snatch 106 on week 3. Then we're going to have a really light week. And then you're going to go to competition. You're going to snatch 110, something like that. But I know you're fishing for something more concrete, but I haven't written this one 4-week taper program that I give to people, because I'm so opposed to that as a concept. Because to me, everything differs. Like I have some guys who I would keep them squatting like 3 times a week, probably right up until a week or 2 out from competition, because they need it. And then I have other people where I might just get them to do a heavy single or some heavy doubles for the final 4 weeks once a week, and then everything goes on their snatch and clean and jerk. So I just can't give you this one progression that I use for every person, because it can be so different. It can just be so different.
Yeah, and it's
and I
funny.
Apologize for that.
No, that's the answer I'm used to receiving, because I ask very pointed questions. When do we manipulate intensity, and how much, by how much? And then someone's like, well, it depends. And then it's like, oh, what type of lifter should use this variation? And then it depends. And I think that gets across two points. It's that there is a big chunk of this that chalks up to individual differences, and maybe not so much in the person's physiology, because that's relatively static from person to person, but just the way they're built, their training age, skill level, all of those other variables. Now, as far as having numbers planned to hit at a competition, do you want to see someone hit those in training? Because you talk about hitting an opener a certain number of times. Are you looking to actually match the maximum? Or is it kind of just, if they hit this, I know they're good for more? And then this, I guess the second scenario would be, if they're not a competition lifter, that almost begs the need to hit that number in training.
When you say they're not a competition lifter, do you mean that they're not that good in competition, or they just don't compete?
They're not that good in competition, right? So if we see it on the spectrum, I'm a person that gets 3 to 5 kilos more in a competition, which isn't huge. Yeah. I mean, I've heard
it's a little bit
stories of people getting like 20 kilos, which I
Ian Wilson,
I don't know how that happens, but
Ian told me that when he snatched 173 for the American record, the most he'd snatched in the build-up was 157, or maybe it was 158, something like that. So he put on another 15 kilos.
How do you
just
program
from that competition? I mean, he opened at 160.
That's absurd.
But he doesn't even have programming.
True.
Like he maxes a snatch and clean and jerk and a squat every day. That's just what he does. So for that, for most of my people, because we're not necessarily competing every single training cycle, even though I would like them to do it more and more often. At the end of every cycle, at least at the end of every 12 weeks, we're going to hit a new single, a new heavyweight. It's going to be a PR. And there might have been opportunities for them to have done that before. There might have been EMOMs where you can keep going up if you make the first 10 perfectly. But if you miss, then you have to go back. So there are opportunities for them to exceed what they've done before. But there is no, I don't feel like people have to have snatched 100 kilos in training for me to have the third attempt at 100 kilos on the platform. You know, I mean, John Brose once said that the whole point of training is not to hit, the whole point of training is not to hit your best lifts in training, is to hit your best lifts in competition. Which is strange coming from a guy who is so Bulgarian. But I remember him saying that once in a podcast. So I like, all my guys have to have hit the openers multiple times. Just, it has to be so confident that they can hit it, you know, 9 out of 10 times probably. Something that they're going to have no fear of opening with, because they've done it in this, you know, wave form every single Monday. In the first week, they did it for 3 doubles. On the second week, they had it for some singles. And by the third week, they were doing it again for some singles. So they know they're going to make it every single time, and it's not fearful to them. Their second attempt, which is normally for me going to be 97 to 98%, I want them to have hit pretty much weekly for the last 4 weeks, just so, again, they feel comfortable with it. They might have missed 1 out of every 3 or 4 attempts at it, but basically that 97%, if you program properly for the week, they should make it. And it's not that you should always be able to make 97%. It's that you shouldn't put stupid things the day before that are going to mean that they're not going to put it. And if you are going to have heavy squats, then you just don't put it there, because it's going to upset the lifter when they miss. But then that max attempt, if they, you know, I have some guys who will not want to take an attempt on a platform unless they've made it. And some people who kind of see the competition as the only reason to do that. It's like, why compete if you're not going to do something you've never done? That's how I am in competition. I'm kind of like you. Like, my third attempt is like, I'm consistent. So I always make my first and second. Then my third attempt is like, I've just got to go for PR. I'm not going to go crazy. I'll go for like a kilo, but I just think, why not? Like, the only reason we do anything in the gym is for that one moment in competition where we go for a personal record. There's no other reason we train. We don't train to improve the squat. We don't train to get heavy lifts in training. We train to get a big total in competition. So I like everything to aim towards that. And the more confident you can get with your opener, and if you can hit your second attempt a few times in the few weeks build up, that's great. But there's no prerequisite to a competition where you have to hit your third attempt, you know, especially if you're at a national meet or you're going for the, you know, Pan Ams, you're going for Worlds, where that third attempt can change. And if you just have, okay, you're going to snatch 150 on your third attempt, it's like, what if you need 152 to get in a position to go to Pan Ams? Like, you just got to put it on the bar and attempt it. But no, I don't make my guys hit an absolute max before they compete. They can do that on the platform if they want to.
Yeah, and I talked to Sean about this, and I tried talking to other people, but they didn't have a similar answer. But as far as like having a roadmap for determining those attempts, do you have exercises that you like to use that if they improve, it helps your predictive power of what they'll be able to hit? So we may have touched on this, but Sean gave the example of a block clean, a low hand clean, and a few other exercises. Do you have any lifts that are kind of your go-to that you feel like have the most carryover, that if that gets up to 95, 98%, they're guaranteed for a PR?
I mean, you're just going to hate my answer, but it depends. But I'll give you a concrete reason as to why it depends. So if I have a lifter who is got quite long limbs, if they do particularly well off a block and they hit 95% of their confident, it means they've got, you know, their one quality that they rely on, which is pulling the bar high. We've taken that out of the equation, and they've got enough power and they've got enough quad strength to finish the lift, which they don't usually have if you're a longer limb lifter, to make that 95%. I feel great that they're going to be able to hit 101% when we go from the floor. If I had someone who's got a really long spine and shorter femurs and shorter limbs, and they did 95% off blocks, it just wouldn't mean anything to me. It's like, you're supposed to be able to do that because you're in a way more advantaged position at this point than the taller person or the longer limbed person. But then if I had someone who's got a long spine and shorter limbs and they hit a good power snatch, if, you know, like I can always power snatch 90%, like that's just basically where I'm at. But if I had someone like that and they power snatch 90%, like if Ilias power snatched 90%, it'd be unbelievable. But if Klokov power snatched 90%, it would be kind of maybe what you'd expect, you know? So it's very dependent on the athlete. But I mean, if you just want, like, very quickly for people listening, a quick 4-week progression of just how to snatch in the 4 weeks build up, I could just lay one out quickly.
They would love that. Okay,
let's just do that quickly. So let's just say it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you're competing on a Friday. Monday, you're going to wave with week 1, week 2, week 3, and you're going to do 75%, 80, 85%. And you're going to do 20 singles or some variation of that. So 20 singles or 7 triples, something that creates about 20 reps. But let's just use an EMOM example. So the Mondays will go 20 minutes at 75%, 60 minutes at 80%, 12 minutes at 85%, and then the final week will be like 5 at 90%. Then the middle session of the week on a Wednesday is just going to be some light powers that don't change a huge amount. I mean, they might be 80% for 3 doubles, 82% for 3 doubles, 84% for 3 doubles, and then on the final week, it will be like 70% for 3 singles, just as a kind of deload. And then on your Friday, the max weight will do 3 triples at 85%. Next week, 3 doubles at 90%. Next week, 3 singles at 95%. And then the week after that, you're maxing out. So everything is building up. The Monday volume is coming down from 20 reps down to 5 reps, but the intensity is going from 75% all the way up to 90%. The Wednesday one is staying some kind of power, and you're moving from 80% to 84% with a 70% on the final week to really just decrease the load on your legs. And that final one at the end is, I'm making triples at 85%. So I can definitely do the doubles next week at 90%. Then I can definitely do the singles at 95%. And if you make all 3 singles at 95% on week 3, you're probably going to feel good to hit a heavy 101% snatch on week 4, considering the fact that you only did 5 reps on a Monday, you did 70% on your powers on the Wednesday, and you can max and PR on the Friday. Okay. That's easy. That's just like a basic thing.
That is very basic. And then just kind of filling in the blank spots. As far as the strength work goes, I know I've heard this a lot. People always talk about sticking solely to the front squat during a peak. Are you aligned with that? Would you just solely front squat?
I've never done that.
Front squat heavy? Okay, then what do the squats look like? Because I feel like that's a variation or an exercise that a lot of people have in their program. It's going to be the very rare person that doesn't squat at all. So as far as squats go, are we working triples, doubles, and singles? What does that look like in that build-up as well?
I'm rarely working singles in the front squat or the back squat, like so rarely. Because if you do a really, really heavy single, it is good in that there was nothing that will improve the neural efficiency of your squatting and the recruitment of muscle fiber in the squatting and improve your inter and intramuscular coordination as a very heavy single, because it's the most specific thing. If you're doing sets of 10, it's a lot of hypertrophy going on, but you're not really increasing the neural efficiency of your squat. So doing a heavy single is great, but it's so grindy if you do a really heavy one that it does kind of hurt you for the next day, especially if it's a back squat. So, okay, to not do that and not hurt, you'd have to do a single at 93%. But then at that point, it's like, is that single good enough? Like, could you have just done a triple at 85% and got more of a workout out of it? You know, a single at 93% isn't that hard. So, I mean, 4 weeks out and even 3 weeks out, you know, I have people doing sets of 4, maybe sets of 3 at 85 to 90%, something like that. But the way I see it, and you kind of actually opened my eyes to this, I thought what you said was really smart last time we spoke on a podcast, was that the volume of the squats will go down. And, you know, I'm looking for people to do a set on the squats where it looks like they could have done 1, maybe 2 more reps. So it's never too grindy. It's still a heavy load. So, you know, you can probably squat 90% for a set of 4, most people, if they've really pushed it. So we'll do it for a double. It's still a good stimulus. It's still getting you strong and keeping you efficient. But then what we're going to do is we're going to maintain a decent amount of volume on accessory lifts. And that's what we spoke about last time that I thought was great, the way that you said it was doing a snatch pull at 80%. or a snatch at 80% doesn't give the specific muscles that are used in the snatch enough of a stimulus to maintain their strength level. And that's why you have to do some pull-ups and you have to do some hip extensions and glute hams, or maybe 3 singles in the snatch deadlift at 110% on the week of. Something to stop the muscles from switching off, something to give them enough of a stimulus to maintain their strength levels. So with squatting, I mean, I probably have them squat 2 or 3 times a week, depending on the athlete, obviously. No single set will be to absolute failure. Maybe 4 weeks out, we'll go to absolute failure. That's fine. But generally 3 weeks out, 2 weeks out, 1 week out, the intensity is going to be 85 to 95%, but with none of the reps being too grindy. And I'm not worried about if I program someone 4 triples at 88%, if the third set, that final rep looks a little bit tough, and we just shut it down. Because it's like that 4th set is not going to make a huge amount of difference to you, but it could really tire you out. You know, the more and more sets you add to something, the less of a positive effect it actually has on your body. You know, that first set is the best set in terms of the strength, that it gives you. So getting rid of the 4th set or a 3rd set is not that big of a deal at all. And I've actually done the waves before with the front squat. Like I've done 85% triple, 90% double, 95% single, 3 waves. That's quite fun. That's quite fun. I like doing that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I'm not doing heavy sets of 5. I'm just doing triples, maybe a few heavy pause singles. But you know, the squats are no longer there to really ruin you, to keep you strong, and the accessory lifts take place of the extra squats that you're not doing. So if you normally do 25 squats at 80%, we're just going to do 12. And instead of doing the other 13, we're just going to do a few more glute hams. We're going to do a few more pull-ups. We're going to just make sure that the individual muscles used are receiving a reasonable stimulus muscularly, but not neurally. Nothing that's going to actually, you know, fuck you up too much.
Yeah. And I guess my case for heavy singles, the lead up to the meet, would be that you're not trying to improve the single and the squat, which happens, right? When you do singles, you get better at singles. But what it does, I think it gives you a better bang for your buck. It's all about minimizing work and maximizing effect, right? So if we do a really heavy single, and it's kind of grindy, but granted you can hold your positions and you can fight through it without taking the shape of a banana in a front squat. I think what that does is it allows you to do less work in the squat, but then keep your strength up. In that sense. So I'll normally what I'll do is I'll program a single in the front squat, and then I'll have some doubles coming down at like 90%. And those again, it's kind of like you said, it depends on how they look. Right? If it starts getting way too difficult, just shut it down. It's not that important. But the single ensures that the next time you come into squat, it's not going to be foreign. It's not going to feel heavy. Your strength isn't taking a hit. So I like singles in the front squat. I probably wouldn't do it in the back squat.
No, I would agree with that. The thing is, the singles prevent you from getting weaker, but they don't really get you that much stronger. So you know, if you really want to prioritize on a Wednesday, the fact that you've got to do these 85, 90, 95% waves 3 times on the snatch and the clean and jerk, but you still need to get something heavier in, then just go up and hit a 95% single on the front squat. Make sure it doesn't grind too much. And that is a great way to maintain the strength. You're not going to ruin yourself too much. You're not going to get stronger, but you are going to not get weaker.
Well, it's
like Louis Simmons.
Seb, you said something so good, I had to cut you off.
Go on.
The biggest thing, the key there is that you're doing it after the snatch and the clean and jerk. And that's actually the approach I took, is you would take the heavy snatch and clean and jerk days, you'd front squat after, and then you'd have the 80% technique day immediately following. Right? So you're training the skill of the sport, you're maintaining your strength, and then you get the recovery period in between. Which is incredibly important. I'm not going to take a Tuesday workout between Monday and Wednesday where we're performing volume and then some sort of like maximal variation or whatever your method is. And then squat you heavy. That's not effective for anybody. And I've kind of gotten away from, I'm getting away from squatting in between snatch and clean and jerk workouts, because I found even if it doesn't beat you up to the extreme, it's going to affect the lifts. And at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to perfect is the snatch and the clean and jerk. The squat just kind of aids in that. So
yeah, I mean, on the two heaviest or the two most demanding squat days of the week with my guys, Tuesday and a Saturday generally, they take the day off the next day. Like Wednesday is our day off.
Yeah.
And then they go really heavy again on a Saturday, and they have Sunday off. And that seems to work well. I mean, there are some people who I will then bring in, and they do some light lifts just because they're at a slightly higher level and they need to do more and more. But for most people, like, I agree. If you do heavy snatches on a Tuesday, or voluminous snatches on a Tuesday, voluminous squats on a Wednesday, and then expect them to come in and snatch well again on a Thursday, it's like you've not coupled it well enough. You need to put more demanding things together on one day and have other days there to recover to some extent, I guess.
And I know we have a limited amount of time, but I do have two questions that kind of branch from that. Now, as far as the snatch and the clean and jerk goes, do you ever find it necessary to split the two exercises up and perform them on different days? And then the second part of that would be, do you always try to equate the volume between the snatch and the clean and jerk? And when would you not do that?
I don't split them up as much as I feel I could split them up.
Okay, I need an explanation there, because I've thought about this very thoroughly, and I always feel like I should split them up, but something, maybe my intuition just won't allow me to do that. So I'm curious to hear what you're going to say.
Well, I think the more things you try and develop in one session, the more you dilute everything. You know, the Chinese split them up. The Chinese do all snatch exercises together. They'll snatch, they'll do snatch pulls, and then they'll do hypertrophy work for the snatch, like wide grip pull-ups, which they believe that there's a high correlation between a 1-rep max pull-up and a max snatch, which is quite interesting, but that's for another time. The Russians split everything up. They do all of their snatch training, say in the morning, and then they'll do all of their clean and jerk training, which could be, you know, cleans, front squats, push press, in the afternoon session. You know, that's just how they do it. They split these things up so that they're able to give more of a focus to those things. So I think there's pros and cons there. You know, I think if you can train 5 days a week, then you can't afford to split things up too much, or you're only going to snatch 2 or 3 times a week and clean 2 or 3 times a week. So there is that kind of necessitates or dictates that for people who are doing this more as a hobby, and for people who want to be great but they still have a job, they're probably going to have to do both things at once. But I don't, beyond the fact that if you want your guys to snatch 4 times a week and clean and jerk 4 times a week, but they've only got 5 training sessions, beyond the fact that it's just obvious that they have to do them at the same time, I don't have a really amazingly articulate answer as to why they should do it at the same time. I mean, I'd be interested to try and split it up a little bit. I just get wary of the fact that by splitting it up, if they're not going to then split it up into the single day, you know, morning and evening, then they're not going to get enough practice at the lifts.
Yeah, I mean, for powerlifters, it makes sense, right? Squatting heavy, benching heavy, and then deadlifting heavy is so taxing within a workout.
That makes absolute sense, yeah.
And then I always think that if you're snatching heavy, that's not so much a taxing workout. I mean, even if your snatch is relatively high, but then it always gets me with the clean and jerk. I feel like a heavy clean and jerk workout, and you were talking about EMOM earlier, 20 reps at 75%. Holy cow. That's a lot of work.
Well, right? Yeah, I mean, I was just chucking out a random thing. Well, but yeah, something like that. Or it could be just 5 sets of 1 plus 2, or 6 sets of 2 plus 1, you know, and you can rest 3 or 4 minutes or however long you need in between. But something like that. Or just 5 full doubles, clean jerk, 5 times. That's 20 reps.
So have you ever played around with having a heavy snatch day and then a light clean and jerk day, and then flipping the two maybe later on in the week?
Yes, I have had that, and I've actually had great response from that myself. When 4 years ago, when Travis Mash first appeared on the scene, I decided to join his team just to see what the fuss was about. And he did that, and I can remember that program. I could probably write out the 12 weeks right now. That's how well I remember it. And it was a great program. And the Monday pushed the snatch significantly. And then you would do another exercise. And I think the other exercise was like press and split. And then the third exercise you'd clean, and you'd just clean to 80% for a double. Then on the Wednesday, the tables would turn, and you'd do really heavy clean and jerks to start with, maybe up to 88 or 90% or 93%. And then after that, you would do snatches to 80% for a double. And doing the snatches after the clean jerks was incredibly hard, but it was quite nice. Just, the focus of the day is I'm going to snatch to 90% today with triples and doubles all along the way up. And then after that, all I've got to do is my 80% on the clean for a double. And the next week it was 83%. And then the next week it was 85%. And then you deloaded on the fourth week. So by the end of it, you were doing a good amount. But there was one stress on each day, which was this is a snatch focused day. This is a clean and jerk focused day. But another interesting thing thinking about that program is how many programs I've run where the squats are put on a Tuesday and not on a Monday. And Travis Mash does that. Glenn does that. I do that. A bunch of other programs that I've looked at do that. And I think part of that is the mental thing of not wanting to ruin someone the first day of a program. Let them get some really good, solid technique in. Let them get the repetition and needed to really solidify some really decent movement. And then let's worry about the squats on the Tuesday.
Well, you know that Bob Takano, looking at a lot of his programs, he squats first before the lifts.
Yes.
I couldn't imagine that.
So I've got a lot of opinion on Bob Takano.
Let's hear
it. Well, Bob Takano has a terrific understanding of Soviet programming. Terrific. Really, really good. He's read everything that was translated by Bud Charniger. He knows his stuff, and he can write a program that you could slip into a 1980s training hall and no one would know that it was him. Like, he could get away with that. That's how perfect it was. He follows everything to a T in terms of the research that the Soviets did back in the day during the space race, basically. But when the Russians came over, when Klokov and Polovnikov and Ilya came over to the USA and did some seminars a few years ago, they went to Waxman's gym. And Sean Waxman was coached initially by Bob Takano and likes Bob Takano, but he showed these guys a Bob Takano program and said, this is based off Soviet programming. Is this what you do? And they all looked at it and they laughed and they said, this is ridiculous. No one could ever recover from this type of training. And clearly they've moved away from it. And I have friends who continue to rerun Takano programs and do not get any progress. And I think there's a reason for that. And the reason is that these programs were tested on athletes who were enhanced by pharmaceutical supplements. That's not a controversial thing to say. We just know that. There are many interviews that I've read with Soviet lifters. Pizarenko is one of them that I'm thinking, where they just say very casually, drugs are in weightlifting. We take drugs, and without them, you will never do what we do, basically. So to be able to get the required amount of volume to squat according to their literature at 75%, you can get away with doing 3 sets of 4 because that fits into the parameters that were put forward by Prilipin. That is not enough of a stimulus for a natural athlete to get strong. It's just not. 3 sets of 4, 75% is a joke of a workout. Anyone could do that. It's not difficult. And, he'll put that 5 days a week, literally 5 days a week in a Takano program. And then by the end of it, you've done a tremendous volume of squats. You've done 70 squats for the week, 70 working reps. That's quite a lot of working reps in a squat. Sometimes you'd even do, 100 working reps in a squat a week. But they average out at 75%. Sometimes they're 70%, occasionally they're 80%, but they're never more than that. And I really think that as a natural athlete, when you're lacking, the main quality you're lacking in is not technique, it's strength. You have to put more of a demand on that, and you have to give up some of your volume to just pushing harder and harder at the strength lifts. And if you're not doing sets of 5 at 80% or above, or you're not doing, sets of 10 at 70% sometimes, rather than just 4 sets of 4, I think you're going to do a disservice to how strong you can get. So I think those programs, you can get down a rabbit hole where they look completely perfect and you can become obsessed with them. And I've got the Takano book and I've read through all of them, and they are like beautiful programs. They're just amazing. And if I had someone who was 8 years old and I knew I was going to have them till they were 30, and I could put them on drugs when they turned 18, then I would just go through essentially Tucano programs for the 22 years that they were going to be competing for. But that's not how we are, and we're not able to take drugs. And so we need to actually push strength exercises way harder than Bob Tucano does in his programming.
Yeah, I think the Tucano program is like a beautiful picture. I would hang it on my wall, but I would never use it.
Oh yeah, it's so perfectly and beautifully put together, and everything threads into everything, and the totals are accounted for, and the weekly tonnage and the daily tonnage and the percentage, and it's like, this is just a masterpiece. But Bob Tucano has never created a really high level athlete. Like, he just hasn't. He's not done that. But Travis Mash has.
Yeah,
I know people give Travis Mash a hard time. But
I don't like you saying that, because there are a couple things there. He's developed people. I'll give him that. But he has an ability to recruit talented individuals that maybe give his style of programming and coaching a bit more notoriety than it deserves.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I mean,
you look at the people he's bringing on, and they're back squatting almost 600 pounds at 20 years old.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. I mean, Travis Mash is on the top of my head because we were talking about that program. But okay, let's talk about Sean Waxman.
Yeah.
Or Ursula. Or Dave Spitz.
Okay.
Or John Coffey. Or these guys. They're not doing 70% for 3 sets of 5. And they're not doing 80% for 3 threes. They're doing 80% for 4 sets of 6. Yeah. And they're actually pushing harder work at these slightly higher percentages in the squats.
Yeah, and I don't want to pick on Travis at all. I don't mean to come off like that. I actually met him at the American Open Series too. And
why are you hating on Travis, bro?
well, this is why. I saw him in the warm-up room, and he had just got done coaching a few lifters, and he was walking by me, and I stopped him, and he had this blank look on his face. He looked like some kind of zombie. It was just no consciousness. And I said, Travis, hey, I'm a big fan. I love all your work. I'm actually really good friends with Seb. I tried to use that as like an icebreaker. And he's like, all he said was, Seb, I love that guy. And then he just walked past me. And it's a really awkward experience.
Well, I love the fact that he said that. I thought you were going to say, I was genuinely worried that you were about to say, I said to him, I'm good friends with Seb. And he said back to me, who's Seb? But I'm glad that he knew who I was.
Yeah. And not to get too far away from the programming, but that's the reason I use rep maxes isn't to always hit a PR, but it's, you're training so close to the threshold to develop strength that there's no question. And then if you back off 5%, 10%, all of your working sets are easily going to be able to be accomplished. You just hit a heavier set, the same reps. But you're still right on that threshold, which is of the utmost importance for a natural athlete, as you kind of alluded to. It's training at a high enough intensity to develop strength. And that's a heuristic. It's a shortcut. I'm going to hit a heavy set. I'm going to come down 5% for one, 10% for another. And all of my training is within 10% of my max for the day. That's perfect.
Yeah, that's what I like. I think that's the best way to get a natural athlete strong.
It is.
I mean, this is one of the things that Glenn Penley and I have said many times on our podcast is that, or whenever I have him on at least, is that he says that when you're an enhanced lifter, just a simple act of snatching and clean and jerking and some singles or some 80% doubles in the squats, that's enough of a stimulus on your body in conjunction with the steroids that you're taking to continually get stronger. But if I did that, I wouldn't continually get stronger. I would probably get more technically precise at the lifts because you'd be doing way more volume of snatch and clean and jerk. Bob Tucano programs, like the amount of snatch and clean and jerking you do is insane. But I wouldn't get stronger because it's not enough of a stimulus. It's not enough force production because everything is so light that you can move through it quick enough to not produce as much force. You produce more force with something heavy and slow than you do with something light and fast. And you have to train both, and you have to do the snatches that you move quickly, but you have to push against something heavy to produce more and more force.
Yeah, and I will say that it does vary based on skill level, because I'm working with a beginner right now, and we're having her do 8 singles in the snatch, or 8 sets of a complex in the snatch, and then 8 sets of a clean and jerk or variation 3 times a week. And that's a decent amount of volume. Along with the pulls, the snatch pulls and clean pulls and squats. But the thing is, it's like you said, it's developing technique at that point, right? It's about developing proficiency in the lift. So I'm very aware that you're limited on time. So
I wish I didn't have things to do in my life, but I do.
So Seb, as we kind of wrap up here, do you have anything you would like to say on any of the topics we've covered that you feel like needs to be heard?
Use any injury as an excuse to become extraordinary at something else. Don't see an injury as an excuse, because it just never is. You know, it's a way to have an incredibly strong strict press, or it's a way to have an incredibly strong front squat, or an incredibly strong pull, or in my example, you know, my goal is I want to hit powers above my full lifts, and like that's probably not going to happen, but that is my goal for this period of time. So I am just doing powers in every rep range of every height block as much as possible, and my powers are going up. Like, I'm using this as a chance to become incredible for me at something that I'm able to do. So don't let an injury become an excuse to not train hard. And then the other thing is, don't let a competition become an excuse to not train hard. You know, a local meet is a great thing to go to do as training. It's a training thing. It's a way to test how good you are without having to taper and peak all the time. And if every single time you taper and you peak for these small programs, you're just putting a halt on the adaptation process. You're putting a halt on how good you could be. If you'd have gone over the last year, instead of doing these 12 meets and tapering for every single one of them, if you'd have trained through them all and just turned up and done them, you'd be lifting more at the 12th meet than you would be if you'd have tapered for all of them. Taper for things that actually count and mean something, and use competitions as a part of the training process. Use them as a way to test yourself in another dimension, but don't taper for every single meet. You'll be worse off for it. Pick a few that mean something, and use the others as training.
Yeah, I've actually been changing my philosophy a bit on this. A lot of people talk about a training session as being a drop in a bucket. So what it adds to the overall amount of liquid in that bucket is very small. I actually have noticed that it's probably the reverse of that. You should take every single rep and every single training day with the utmost with the utmost intent that you're going to get the most out of it, because I don't think people realize what one individual thing will add to the whole, right? So if you focus just on doing this individual rep, this one rep with the bar correctly, and then the next rep correctly, and then the rep after that, not only does it lead to a better performance within a training session, but it'll lead to a better performance within the week, and then within the month, and then within the entire training plan.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people don't recognize the influence of how well this individual workout is, or how well this individual week is, and people kind of chalk it up to, oh, I'm not able to get in the gym and train, so I'm just going to take. It doesn't really matter. It's a small part of my career. But when you're as injured as frequently as we are, your career is shortened even more, right?
Yeah.
And then that 10 years maybe changes to 8 years and 6 years. And maybe for some people it's 4 years, right? You have to maximize those 4 years. And the only way you're going to do that is by putting an immense amount of focus into every single rep, every single training session, every single training week, every single training month. And it's monotonous, and sometimes you just want to get the work done. But I don't think that's how champions operate. I really don't. And I think that's a very average way to look at it. It's a very short-sighted way to look at it too. Because the one quote we've probably talked about before is, there's going to be a day where you hit, or there's going to be a day when you hit your last PR. It's just the way it is. So how many sessions do you want?
Isn't that terrifying?
It is, and I don't want to be in a position where I say, well, I've wasted 30 weeks of training because I didn't feel like pushing it, or I didn't. I just wasn't into it. I wasn't in it. And when people tell me they aren't in it, or they miss reps because they get lazy. I think that's probably the thing I can't stand the most, right? Mm-hmm. If you're committed to every rep. You're committed to the work. And I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent, but
no, I like it. You're right. It's this weird dichotomy between, the phrase that Glenn says a lot, which I love, is that training is a process, not an event. And yet it is an event at the same time. So what he says this is that every single day that you train, you're training for the following day. And you're training for the following day. You're training to put yourself in a position to be better the next day, and to be better the next day, or be better a week from now. No one workout will be a workout that makes you a champion. No one workout. It's not like you can do this one epic training session where you do sets of 5 to max on every single exercise. It's like the body can only adapt so fast. And if you do all of that stuff on one session, you're not going to get twice as strong because of that, just from that one session. But you will ruin yourself for the future. So training isn't a single event. It's not like I went ham today and I had an epic workout and I'm going to be better for it. It's like, no, you've got to do 10,000 of those carefully, one after the other. Training is a process. But at the same time, it is an event because, like you said, I mean, that essentially is on the macro. That's looking at as a long process. But if you look at it day by day, just like you were saying, this rep is important because it's setting me up for the next rep that's important and the next rep that's important. So yeah, I mean, I like what you said and I like what Glenn said. And even though you're looking at it more in a micro and he's looking at it more in a macro, the idea is that there is no one session that's going to do everything for you. If your body could adapt way quicker just from working ridiculously hard every day, then we would all just do that every day. But the body can only adapt so fast. And you've got to make sure that you put yourself in a position to be able to receive that adaptation every single day for 10 years, rather than ruin yourself one day and not be able to do it the next day, or take a week off, or go light, or be lazy. Take care of how you train, because you can receive this adaptation every single day. And if you do that as a process for 10 years, you might be a half decent weightlifter at the end. And that's the goal for everyone.
Well, Seb, as always, I have a lot to say on that, but we will round this out by covering your new book that's coming out.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you kind of spill all of that information to the audience?
Yes, please. Now, this is something that I am really, really excited about. As you can tell, I've perked up because I'm so passionate about this. So for those of you who have been listening, you might kind of know about this already, but I've been doing a Friday podcast called the Sinclair Countdown, and I've been counting down over the last 6 months the life and times and careers of the greatest weightlifters to ever do it, starting at number 70 and working my way up to number 1. Last week, I had numbers 4 and 3. So that was Zakharevich and Solodov. Next week are the final 2. I won't say the names of them, even though I'm sure some of you listening actually know who they are. I'm sure everyone knows who number 1 is. But and anyway, I was approached by a publishing company called Powerful Ideas Press, and they're really awesome, and they've worked tremendously hard with me to get this done. But we're turning this whole series into a book, and it's going to be called the greatest weightlifters of all time. This is volume 1. This is the men's, and it's going to be in hardback. There's going to be, a few pages on every single athlete, their life and times, their best performances, how they trained, how they grew up, with amazing photos of every single athlete in there as well. And it's going to be like a kind of coffee table book. And the way I see it is that I think that it's genuinely going to be of value, or at least I hope that it's going to be of value to the weightlifting community. We've never had anything like this where we have the history of our sport all in one place for you to find. And this is now going to be a tangible thing that you can have on your coffee table or in your chest of drawers or on the bookshelf that is the history of the greatest to ever do it. We always talk about, standing on the shoulders of giants. With this, these are the giants. These are the guys that paved the way. Without some of these guys, you wouldn't have some of the performances we have now. We're all standing on the shoulders of these guys. Without knowing what they did in the 80s, without seeing what was possible, we would have no idea what our guys are capable of doing now. We'd have no sense of what we can do these days. So that's it, basically. It's a hardback. It's going to be an amazing book. I can't wait for it to come out. It will be available. Well, it will be literally in people's hands by the end of October, and there'll be a pre-order link in the next week or two. I've got a time schedule with everything on it, but it's rare that I'm proud of myself for something that I've done. I always give myself a hard time, but I'm genuinely proud of this. I think this is going to be something that will be a positive impact to the sport of weightlifting. I've spent hundreds of hours on it, and if you're interested about the history of the sport and you want to know more about the life of Pisarenko and Halomutlu and Liu Zhaojun and Rahimov and Ilya and the old guys and the new guys, then this is, about as good a gift as you can ever get.
Yeah, and I think if those names don't sound familiar, that's even more of a reason to get the book. There's something about having a better or a fuller appreciation for the sport once you understand where you come from and who's preceded you. And I like to think of it as standing on the platform of giants because we've all stood on the same wood, the same size square and kind of lifted there. So now we were planning on this, possibly a giveaway for the listeners.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
And that will be released a little later on, but this is kind of just like a heads up. You're still deciding on the cover of the book, and you have a pull out.
Yeah, so if I've got the rights to all these amazing photos, but if you go to my Instagram, so Weightlifting House Instagram, I put up my sort of the 10 finalists, and I'm trying to pick between those 10 as to who's going to be on the front cover. So if you go over there, you can vote on that, which is cool. I want to have some kind of I want to kind of make this the people's book to some extent and have people vote on what photos should be in there, which I think is pretty cool, rather than just me and my opinions. I mean, the athletes that are in there are picked, but the photos that go along with them, I could do with a little bit of help on. But when I have that done and I can get an absolute replica of what the front cover is going to look with the writing on it and everything, then I'll send that to Josh. And I guess what we'll do is if people, I think this would be a good way to do it. If people post the picture of the front cover on their Instagram, then Josh will go through them. I guess if they use the hashtag Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast or whatever your favorite hashtag is, I guess you can talk about that on a future podcast. Josh will pick it, and then someone will get a copy of the hardback book arriving at their doorstep mid to late October. So I think that'll be fun. I'm going to do a few giveaways. There'll be a few more, I'm sure, on my podcast as well, and a few other podcasts that I go on to. I'll do some giveaways. So if you want a book and you want it for free, stay tuned on Josh's podcast because he'll give you the directions on how to do that.
Yeah, and I don't want to influence anybody's decision on which photo is best, but the first one, in my opinion, was beautiful.
The Pisarenko one?
Yeah, I agree. The split. Yeah. The color was great.
Color's amazing.
Great color. Awesome shot.
And who are we kidding? The mustache was pretty incredible too. That's a sensational bit of facial hair.
Agreed. So we will again announce this at a future date. When he releases that, I'll probably have him on the podcast again, and we'll discuss it. Just to remind everyone that it is out, and there is a free copy to be had. And if you don't win it, you can still buy it. It's going to be very affordable. It's going to be a great book.
It'll be available on my website, and then down the line, it'll be on Amazon, and hopefully we'll get it in a few bookshops as well, which will be pretty fun. It'll be available on Kindle form and that kind of thing. But I mean, I think actually having it in hardback is, I'm making something that I wish that I had when I was starting in the sport, and I think that people are going to like this one. But head over to Weightlifting House and vote on that on Instagram, so I have the perfect front cover for the book for you guys. And I'll give a few out as giveaways as well, and Josh will sort that out for you guys in the coming weeks. But maybe we could do an episode where we come on and we talk about some of the greatest performances ever, and we talk about some of the lives or the ways that some of these top guys actually trained. Because that's one of the cool things that I've dug up is I've learned, I know how Taranenko trained. He's clean and jerked more than anyone ever. Although I also realized that Kurlovich received the short end of the straw in his career, and I think he's probably the strongest guy ever. But Taranenko officially has the biggest clean and jerk of all time, and we know how he squatted. We know the frequency that he did his lifts in. We know how long his training sessions were. Like, all of these amazing things are in the book. If there's something to be learned about these guys, and if there's information on how they trained, it's going to be in there. And that's the exciting thing for me. It's not only, their careers and their best performances. It's It's how it happened.
Yeah, and
it's cool. I'm looking forward to it.
If that doesn't make you want to buy the book, I don't know what could. Besides that, which is obviously the project at the front of your mind, you still are selling barbells and T-shirts.
Yes. Yes.
And I know the barbells are going to be shipped out late September, so at the end of the month.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, guys, if you want a great barbell, a YB Normal T-shirt, before you get the book, you can order that as well, right?
Yeah, that's all available for pre-order. I mean, my new website will be live, I think, on Tuesday, so everything will be a little bit more professional and swish looking, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, I'm still selling these amazing barbells, which I'm actually really, that's one of the other things I'm proud of. I really love the quality of these bars. They are, in terms of specs, you can't really find a better bar. And I think the end cap is gorgeous as well. So I'm pleased with those. But yeah, I mean, barbells, T-shirts. I mean, I haven't announced this yet, but I'll announce this now. I'm going to have T-shirts with some of the prints of the best weightlifters of all time on them for people to buy, which I think will be pretty fun. But anyway, yeah, a few things that you can get. But the book is the thing that I'm obsessed with at the moment. I can't wait for people to buy it. I can't wait to hear people's reviews on it. It's about as good a present as you can buy a weightlifter, I think. So in the build up to Christmas, this is a good time to be bringing out a book, I think.
Agreed. And so this can all be found on weightliftinghouse.com. Of course, Seb has his podcast, Weightlifting House Podcast, which is also on Spreaker and iTunes and plenty of other platforms you can find if you Google the name. So, Seb, thanks again for coming on and chatting.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, always a pleasure.
And I'm sure we'll record plenty of episodes in the future, but for now, I want to take the opportunity to thank the listeners and thank the supporters of both of our podcasts. It's always reassuring to get positive feedback that we're having an impact in the community. So thank you guys for listening, supporting the podcast, leaving reviews, and spreading the good word of weightlifting. So on that note, we can round it out. Seb, again, thanks for coming on. And
no problem.
We will catch you guys next time.
All right.